Good morning. I'm looking for my leadership here to tell me when it's time to start, and I think it's showtime, so we are going to get started. So thank you so much, everybody coming out on this wonderful Monday morning. A little chilly, but we got some nice energy and warmth in here, and so we appreciate everybody coming out for our second annual. This is Data Days kicking off number 2, so round of applause. Thank you, and we couldn't have had this event. I just want to take a brief moment to shout out all the people who have made this possible. So if you see someone in the green Day-to-Day shirt, please give them a hug, high five, fist bump, whatever you need, because they have been the army of folks who have made this possible. And I want to just thank them personally for taking what started as an idea in a meeting to being a second annual event with so many people joining us here in person and online. So thank you so much, the Leadership Committee and the Oversight Committee for Day-to-Days. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and officially get started. So the theme for this year's conference is Empowering You. It's a theme that is centered around equipping data users with the tools and resources to manage and leverage data effectively. Throughout this week, I encourage you to engage in conversations and make meaningful connections that help strengthen our culture of continuous learning and data-driven decision-making here at Georgia Tech. Before introducing our first guest speaker, I would like to thank, again, I just thanked our Day-to-Days committee, but I want to thank them again, and ask that if we have the steering committee members, if I can have them kind of stand up so we can acknowledge them. Steering committee? Okay, we got some in the back, some in the front. Thank you again, steering committee. I believe we have a member that's online, Andrea Moses, who also contributed and helped out a lot. So I want to thank her as well. And also, again, thank you again to the volunteers that helped make this a great success. Okay, so getting into the meat and potatoes of the program, I want to introduce our new Executive Vice President for Administration and Finance, Dr. Shantay Bolton. She joined Georgia Tech on August 14th as our Executive Vice President and for Administration and Finance and Chief Business Officer. She serves as a member of the Institute's executive leadership team and leads in developing administrative and operational strategies across the enterprise in support of our strategic plan. She provides leadership, oversight, and direction for A&F, which includes fiscal management and reporting, budgeting, human resources, business services, campus sustainability, facilities planning, design, construction, maintenance, and operations, campus safety, and my personal favorite, information systems and technology, and real estate development. Dr. Bolton has more than 15 years of experience in business operations, human resources, and leadership development, employee engagement and talent management, and strategic training projects through organizational change efforts. Additionally, she mentors multi-generational project leaders and offers thought leadership on generational differences in the workplace. As creator of E3, Engage, Educate, Empower, an action learning model for employee engagement and coaching, she uses it as the foundation to build teams in government, corporate, higher education, and nonprofit industries. Dr. Bolton is a professional with a passion for putting theory into practice through the development of human capital assets, and she is particularly skilled at establishing strategic direction and carrying out projects that improve organizational performance. So I'm pleased to present to you my leader and our boss, Dr. Shantay Bolton.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good morning. Can you all hear me? Yes. I don't know who that person is that he just introduced, but she sounds like a very awesome person to be a part of the Georgia Tech team. Can you give yourselves a round of applause this morning? Thank you so much for coming out. For the individuals that are on live stream, we wish you were here, but we're gonna bring the energy and send it through the screen for you. So good morning, ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, and fellow data enthusiasts. Welcome to Georgia Tech's second annual Data Days. It is with great excitement and immense pride that I stand before you today to inaugurate this remarkable event. Hosted by one of the world's leading in technology and innovation, as we gather here at the heart of this renowned institution, we are not just attendees at a conference, we are participants in a pivotal moment in the evolution of human knowledge. The theme of this year's Data Days, as Daren said, is empowering you. each and every one of you all sitting in the seats today in this room, each and every one of you all who are on live stream. In today's fast-paced digital age, data is not just a buzzword, it is very important to the fabric of our existence. Right? We got kids born today that come out and know how to use a smartphone, and I'm still trying to figure out how to change the settings, right? Every click, every transaction, and every interaction generates a stream of data that holds unparalleled potential. It is not just about the numbers and statistics, it's about understanding human behavior. And I know a thing or two about that. It's about predicting outcomes and shaping a future that is not bound by the constraints of the past. Georgia Tech's Data Days acts as a convergence of brilliant minds, a melting pot of ideas, and a crucible where innovation meets application. Our esteemed speakers, our researchers, our experts are from diverse fields. They will share their insights, their experiences, and groundbreaking discoveries, showcasing the transformative power of data science and analytics. In the next few days, we will explore the vast landscape of data together, from artificial intelligence and machine learning to data ethics and cybersecurity. Our agenda is packed with sessions that will not only broaden our horizon, but also challenge our intellect. This conference is an opportunity for us to learn from each other, to collaborate, and to envision a future where data-driven solutions and decision-making address some of the most pressing issues facing humanity. At the core of our discussions lies a profound responsibility. The insights we gain, the methodologies we develop, and the technologies we create to have real-world implications. They can improve healthcare outcomes, optimize supply chains, combat climate change, enhance education, and drive economic development. Therefore, our deliberations here are not just an academic exercise. They are the blueprint for a better today and a better tomorrow. They help us to be more connected and equitable in the world in which we live in. I urge each and one of you to actively engage in the sessions, to ask questions, and those closest to me know I ask 1,000 questions, right? I want you to challenge assumptions, to embrace the spirit of curiosity and define what it means to be a great scholar and a great innovator, regardless of what your primary functional responsibility is. The connections you make, the knowledge you will acquire, and the inspiration you receive during these days can spark collaboration that leads to innovative ways of doing better what we do every day, as well as ideas to lead to groundbreaking discoveries in the years to come. Before closing, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the organizers. I'm gonna ask that they stand, raise their hand, green shirts, right? Day-to-days folks stand. We're gonna acknowledge you again because we appreciate the work that you've done, and we know that this is not easy to put together. Your passion for data science, your commitment to excellence, and your willingness to share your expertise are the driving forces behind the success of Data Days. Let us embark on this intellectual journey together, with unwavering determination, and a shared commitment to harnessing the power of data for the enhancement of society. Together, we will navigate the data landscape from insights to impact and pave the way for a future where data not only informs our decision, but also transforms our lives. Thank you, and here's to a fruitful, enlightening, and absolutely excellence without exception Data Days event. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bolton. We really appreciate you joining us and kicking us off. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Dr. Amelia Parnell. Dr. Parnell is the Vice President for Research and Policy at NASPA, Student Affairs Administrators in Higher Education, where she leads many of the association's scholarly and advocacy-focused activities. Dr. Parnell is a policy and practitioner experiences include prior roles in association management, legislative policy analysis, internal audit, and TRIO programs. Dr. Parnell writes and speaks frequently about topics related to student affairs, college affordability, student learning outcomes, leadership in higher education, and institutions' use of data and analytics. She is the author of a new book, You Are a Data Person, Strategies for Using Analytics on Campus, and the host of a new podcast, Speaking of College. Dr. Parnell currently serves on the board of directors of EDUCAUSE and is an advisor to several other higher education organizations. She holds a PhD in higher education from Florida State University, master's and bachelor's degrees in business administration from Florida A&M University. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Amelia Parnell.
Okay, before we get started, I'm gonna do a quick tech check, sound check. So all the way in the back, this is about the level I'll speak at. Got it, all thumbs up. If that changes, if the mic goes out, we have a handheld mic, I can switch up very easily. So first things first, I wanna start with some thank yous. And I got my list of people here, so just bear with me. Let me make sure also, what is the hard stop time when I get the hook? Sandy, how long can I go? I'm excited, I got a lot to share. I got 45 minutes. Total, is that before or after the questions? That's total. That's like Amelia, take the side. We can go a little bit longer? Okay, we'll see how the room is feeling. Like Amelia, no, 45 minutes is enough for you to talk. But I think we might get to 45 minutes and you might want to talk a little more. So thank you, Daren. Thank you for the introduction. I know that's policy and practitioner experiences include, and it's a lot of P's, and I wrote that bio and I need to change it. I never think about the person who's gonna read it. Sandy, thank you for the introduction to Data Days. I didn't know anything about it. Sandy and I met a decade ago in Tallahassee, Florida, which is where I lived before I lived in DC, when she was serving on the board of the Association for Institutional Research. How's that for a mouthful? And I was working as a staff member then. And I never thought that a decade later, we'd be back together on your home base. Andrea, I don't know if you're in here, Andrea, who helped me out with all. She's online, Andrea, if you can hear me online. Thank you. Thank you very much. Melanie, thank you for the help with the hotel. Katie and Zach sent the nicest basket of goodies at the hotel. I'm sorry if I'm flexing if nobody else got a basket, but I got a basket last night. It was very, very good, so thank you so much. Thank you for the team that helped me with the audio for the mic. So I did all the P's and the all those things, so I appreciate that. Thank you to all the volunteers. I work at a national association that does lots of conferences, so everything from name badges to signage to everything, the planning calls and the planning calls about the planning calls. I know you all put a lot of work into this, so thank you very much. And thank you to all of you online or in the audience. Somebody said come to Data Days, and you're like, what is that gonna be? Is that gonna be a snooze fest? Is that gonna be exciting? I don't know what you're thinking, but I'm excited. This is my type of event. So when I got the email that said, Amelia, can you convince everybody that we are all data people? Our theme is empowering you. I was like, say less, I'm here. I'm here for that. So for everybody who said, thank you for coming, I wanted to come to this. This is like a nerd's dream. And so we're gonna have nerd camp for 45 plus minutes, depending on if I say anything that excites you. So I'll leave with this also. I love meeting new people. I'll be here till probably maybe 1:32-ish, something like that. If we don't get a chance to connect or talk at some point, email me anytime. I would love to continue any of these conversations. I'll leave my email address. You can have the slides, and I think we're gonna have a good conversation. At least I hope we'll have a good conversation. So that's my picture of Atlanta that I found. Is that right? I'm trying to customize it, make it a little special. I'm gonna tell you some things about me that are not in the bio. So I know I wrote that bio, and it's the one that I always use, but I know how it is when you go into a conference, you're like, who is this person? You know, who is this Amelia? Tell me what she's doing when she's not doing higher ed things. So I'll tell you a few things. We won't spend too long on that. Then I'll dive into some current trends in higher education. And then I'll talk about what it's like to try to balance multiple priorities. And I hope that's the part where I'll sit next to you virtually and you'll say, Amelia has been reading my emails. She knows exactly what's been going on. And then I'll lead that into what I say are 3 keys to using data in pursuit of student success. So spoiler alert, one of those 3 things is where I convince you that you're a data person. One of those 3 things is the new definition of student success that I've come up with, and it's the elusive definition that continues to evolve. Mine is not the definitive one, but I seem to like it a little bit. I'll give you some additional considerations. I'll leave you with some really cool free networks to follow if you want to continue the conversation, some of my favorite resources, and then if we have time, the questions. That's like every visitor's dream. I hope something resonates with you, even if it's just a remark, like I don't agree with that, or I like that a lot, or what do you think about this? It's my favorite part, but I gotta give you something to respond to first, so here we are. In four adjectives, I know what you're looking at. You're looking at that picture in the upper left. We're not there yet. So The four adjectives that describe me are optimist, researcher, connector, and friend. So when I'm not doing day-to-day things and not working in DC at NASPA, I'm usually talking about something that's going on. I tend to try to have a little bit of an optimistic perspective. Now, if you said, hey, Amelia, it's raining outside, none of us have umbrellas, I'm thinking, oh, it's not that bad. Like, Amelia, it's pouring down rain and none of us have umbrellas. That's not that bad. I would annoy you. But I probably would say, maybe if we pull the car around front, we could each get in within about 3 or 4 seconds. We won't get that wet. So I am typically looking for some type of optimism in a scenario. But I'm not naive. I like to know the why behind things, the what's going on, that's the researcher, but I promise I'm not annoying. I'm not the person who, eats that piece of cake. You're like, well, what's the recipe? How much of this did you use? How much of that did you use? I'm not that bad with it, but I am just generally inquisitive. I like to know how things work. I love connecting. Every time I say, email me, let's keep in touch. If you do, I am the one who writes. And so if it's that, hey, I really like that topic of augmented or artificial intelligence, I say, I know somebody. I know Daren at Georgia Tech. Would you like to meet him? I make a connection. I like that. And then lastly, I like to think that we're friends. At some point in higher education, you realize this big old industry that feels huge is actually much smaller than you think, because 10 years later, you might be at the day-to-days. And so I'd like to think that we're friends now and we can stay in touch. So here's what you came for, the picture on the upper left. That is my now 1-year-old mini poodle, Marcus. Does anybody have any experience with raising a puppy? So you all knew what I didn't know about the fact that they chew everything, they lose their teeth, the potty training thing. I decided to not use potty pads. I've been going up and down the elevator. At one point it was 10 times a day. Because I'm nerdy, I logged every one of his pees and poops for the first year, and I was looking for the trend downward. So at first it was 10 times a day, then 8 times a day, then 6 times a day. We are now at 4 times a day, which I think is probably where we're leveling off. He's in a phase now where he doesn't want to eat his kibble unless I put shredded cheese and baked chicken on the top. And so, yeah, I was the one who said, I'm not making food for a puppy. And then he sat there and wasn't gonna eat it. And he got sick. I said, you mean he has to have something on top of it so he won't get sick? I'm gonna bake him some chicken. And then the optimist in me believes that he's gonna get to that elusive age and stage where he just kind of chills out. And we're not quite there yet. And so I'm excited to see what is ahead. And it's been one of the hardest things I've ever tried to learn in life, literally. Upper right is a representation of where I grew up. So if you were to take I-75 south, right where 75 and 10 meet, you'll get to Lake City. And that's where my hometown is. And I grew up on a farm, which taught me a lot about sharing things. And so I'm spending some time on this slide, just so you know kind of who I am and what undergirds it. Bottom left is Hola, to represent my lessons in Spanish, which I take on Sundays with my virtual instructor, Alejandro. Now, I can tell you that being on the stage, I'm very comfortable up here. I like this. I can speak English fluently. But on Sundays with him, one-on-one via Zoom, I get shy. And it's very humbling to say, I have a puppy. I like ice cream. I went to Georgia. That's about the most I can string together. But it reminds me of what it's like to be a student for the first time, learning something for the first time. And he's very patient. He always encourages me, just stumble through it, keep doing it. I've taken that one class in college, but you know what can happen? I can sit in the back. And so if he says, who wants to say good morning in Spanish today? I could just don't make eye contact. You know how it is. If somebody says, hey, you got a question, don't look at him. It's one-on-one. I could not hide. At most, I can say I had a tech issue, but you can't have a tech issue every week, every single week for a whole hour. So it has reminded me of what it's like to actually be in the first time type space. And so the bottom right is I resumed teaching at New England College. I teach a class called Using Data for Action. So I really do like this stuff. And it's been fun. So now, enough of the pleasantries. And now that you know a little bit about who I am, I hope that will kind of set the stage a little bit, let you know I really am a friend. All right, so let's start here. I made this case in a blog post about 5 years ago. And someone said, Amelia, you work at this national association related to student affairs and student services. What's the definition of student success? And I've seen higher ed move through trends. So at one point, it was about teaching and learning. It was, we got to get students more connected to the learning experience. And then it was this access agenda. If we could just get more students to have access to college, that would be better. And then it became the completion agenda. If we can get students into college and get them to complete, then we'll be set. And then it was, what if we get students in and complete, but they're not successful? And so about 5 years ago, that was when that student success thing kind of happened. Everybody had a student success conference, student success coordinators, student success centers, and it was a whole thing. And this group said, hey, we're putting together a blog. Would you write about student success? I'm thinking, could there be anything harder? The elusive student success definition. So I wrote this blog post and I made this statement that I want to bring back around. I said, higher education is an avenue for students to become more engaged citizens, contributors to the public good, and advocates for themselves and others. If we can prepare students to adopt those roles and earn a credential, they will experience the kind of success during and after college that they deserve. How's that? Pretty good, seems reasonable. I thought it was. It was a title that I said, it's time for a real definition of student success. So at that time, if you are Georgia Tech or your big state university or your Florida A&M University, someone's saying, what is student success? So typically when I would ask a campus, how do you define it? They would have an answer. We're gonna come back around to that. They didn't say all of that, but they did say some key metrics like graduation, persistence, retention. So if those three things happen, then we've been successful. And typically I would say, well, what if they graduated, but they didn't find a job? Or let's say they did finish the college experience, but they made no friends. Or maybe they did make friends, but they couldn't really sustain their ideas of health and well-being and solidify what they're going to be individually. Not to say it's not successful, but there's more that we can do. So found a nice picture of 2023, 5 years later. Funny thing happened. So the folks at Georgetown had a summer Institute on Equity. And they said, we dug up this blog post that you wrote 5 years ago, Amelia, and wonder if you have thoughts on what student success should be defined as now. And I said, I do have some thoughts. I got some thoughts of all kinds. Before we get into that, that's like a little precursor. I promised you some current trends in higher education. I put two in red, obviously because of the theme of our discussion. But before we get into that, I want to kind of set the stage of what I'm seeing in higher education. I don't think any of these will probably shock anybody, but if you read the Chronicle or you read Inside Higher Ed or even mainstream media, most of the headlines relate to some of these things. So when I think about the number one reason why someone might start college, might not finish, might have difficulty, would you all agree that cost is probably up there somewhere, the idea? Student loan repayments have resumed as of this month. That's one headline. The cost to educate students, endowments, all kinds of conversations about the cost to educate a student and the cost to the student to attend. There's a whole money conversation swirling around all this. And most of it is that it's becoming more expensive. Next, political involvement and influence is increasing. Pick an example. Doesn't take much. You could go to my beloved Florida. I don't have to tell you who it is and what they're doing. Won't take long for you to find it. The idea that what used to be this discussion many decades ago as college as a bubble or college being separate from the community, no longer the case. I won't describe it as good influence or bad influence, but influence is there. The third, institutions have strained capacity to holistically address students' needs. That's probably not Georgia Tech. I've been impressed already from the number of times I've been here. But there are some campuses that say, hey, specifically in student services, we have more demand than we have people available to work with that, especially in the area of academic advising. I don't know what that's like at Georgia Tech, but if you know an academic advisor, there's a good chance that they have a lot of students that they have to work with every day, and they'd like to spend more time with them, but the questions are more complex. I have some work experience. I want to bring that work experience and get credit for it. How do I do that? I have a student loan, an on-campus job, and a stipend. How do I manage that with the cost of tuition? I think I want to be in early education, but I also want to do IT, and I like architecture on the side. How do I put all that together? And how much can I earn in 5 years? You're like, ooh, we only got 30 minutes to talk about all of what you're doing. So you can imagine, if we bring in health and well-being, socialization pieces, there's a lot that you want to do to help students, and sometimes the time gets to be a little limited. Am I depressing you all with all these headlines here? I promise you're going to end up in a good place. Career preparation is becoming more of a shared responsibility. And I say this from my student affairs hat on. So I've seen campuses that say, because we want students to complete college and their attainment of a credential and getting a job is so important, we're going to move career services to its own special unit that people can come to, facilitate, engage with. Others say, no, career has to be so woven together with their academic decisions, financial decisions, other things. We want it to be under the umbrella of student affairs. Regardless of where you put it, that second headline, if I said the biggest one is that college is expensive, the second one is, what is the purpose of college? Are you going to get a job? Now, we can have a second conversation about the age-old debate about the purpose of college and integrated learning and the general learnings that students should have in socialization versus career attainment and skills and competencies, but that's not this conversation. But it's there. It won't take long to find it if you want to just really get things going. All right, additional pathways to a credential are emerging. So prior learning assessment, the idea that I could probably major in accounting, and if I've been working at an accounting firm for 7 years, maybe talk to my campus and say, I don't need to take the very early prerequisite courses. I've learned those things on my job. Can I get credit for that? Also, I don't want to call it competition, but there are others in the space, the big companies that say, don't worry about going back to big state university. We'll train you here. We'll give you a certification, a credential, and you can keep moving in your career. So I don't see that as a threat per se, but I do think that the model of higher education in the future is going to continue to evolve. We're going to have more people engaged in our business of educating individuals. I promise there's only 3 left. One of which is that enrollment projections are less predictable. Now, if if we had that book from Nathan Graw around 2018, where it was supposed to be this enrollment cliff that was coming in 2025, this idea that the number of traditionally aged college students that would be in college for the first year coming out of high school was going to decline. So that was the headline, like, hey, the cliff is coming, 2025. And then the pandemic happened. And it was like, oh, wait a minute, that conversation about declining enrollments, that's happening several years early. So as a result, you have some campuses that are saying, we don't know quite how precise we need to be, but we know we can't wait till 2023, 2024 to do it. And so some have embraced it and have had great success. Others have been strained by it. But the point is, the predictability that some thought was going to be there, not so much anymore. All right, and then 2 in red, artificial intelligence, which I've now been convinced should be called augmented intelligence based on Daren's depiction. I like that a little bit better than artificial. Seems more real, if you see what I'm saying. Sparking conversations about efficiency and authenticity. The number 1 and number 2 things I hear are what's gonna be the impact of AI coming on my job? And 2, what's gonna be the impact of AI coming on someone else's work? Is it their original work, so on and so forth. I have a couple new slides from a couple slides from a new report that came out from the Chronicle. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then lastly, data-informed interventions are shifting from prediction to prescription. And I'll explain in another slide what I mean by that. All right, so here's that Chronicle survey. So if you were reading your email, it probably was a headline that came in last week, and it was a Chronicle survey of 404 college officials about AI. And basically, they had a whole report full of questions that they asked, and I picked 2 of them that kind of stood out to me. And there's an interesting connection here. So one of the questions in the survey was, which part of college operations will AI tools have a positive impact on in the next 5 years? Now, I couldn't put all of them. This is one of those kind of select all that apply. So in case you were adding them up, Amelia, 69 and 64 and 61, they don't add up. They could choose multiple ones. But the top 4 were teaching, research, career services, and libraries. But I started with this one because I think it's going to have a positive impact. So if you're thinking 5 years ahead, they're thinking teaching's going to be better, research is going to be better, career services going to improve, and libraries. Generally, seems okay to you all? Okay. Interestingly enough, the next question, I put it in yellow to make it bold and dramatic. When it comes to the use of AI, generative AI tools by your college or students, which of these is your biggest concern? Look what's up here. Misinformation or false information, weaker skills or content knowledge, threat to academic integrity, and then it kind of wanes off. We could probably stop there, but I wanted to put some other ones in there. Workforce downsizing, cybersecurity, lack of data privacy. Does that resonate with you all to some degree? Now, if we go back a little bit, the previous slide had research and teaching and learning and career services, but when you look at it here, what used to be a positive reflection earlier in the report of career services now looks like, ooh, I might have some workforce downsizing. So I'm gonna go on a little sidebar and tell you these are my thoughts really quickly on the 2 most popular questions I get, which is, Amelia, what if said platform that I won't name because I don't know if anybody would perceive that as sponsorship, but you all know the one, and it starts with a C and ends with a T. I'll just go there. What if someone were to take that platform and use it for all of their assignments? How could we be sure that student submissions of work is actually their authentic work? And I like to give the example of someone who's in an instructor role like mine. And let's say the assignment for the week is to read this book, You Are a Data Person. And I say the assignment for the week is to write an essay describing the first 3 chapters. And let's say said person says, I got that, no problem. They type into said platform, summarize the first 3 chapters of this book. And so the fear is that, oh no, Amelia's gonna go into that platform, it's gonna give the answer to her, she's gonna just change the title of the thing, submit it, it's gonna be done. I would say, probably so. But what happens when you go to Google and you want a recipe for minestrone? It would give you a recipe for minestrone. But if I said the prompt was, read the first 3 chapters of You Are a Data Person, explain how you professionally in your job might leverage the principles of that book and make your job completely different in the next year. Is said platform going to do that? Probably not. So you would use the platform for the background, the base level information. You'd leverage that for efficiency, but it cannot replace your own original thoughts and ideas. So that's why I'm not so much concerned about it. Here's a second example. Well, I've been doing this job for the last 10 years, and if this new augmented intelligence comes, it's gonna replace what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I would say, maybe not be so concerned about that. There are probably going to be efficiencies, but I don't think of it as elimination of jobs. I think about it as creation of new opportunities. And so I'd like to use the example of manufacturing. So imagine if you worked in an assembly line type fashion, and your job was to put the handle on the door of the car. Every day, your handle on the door, that's your job. And then someone says, we have a new invention here. We have a robot that now can attach the handle of the car to the door, and they can do it twice as fast as you, and they can do it without needing a break. And isn't that great? I'm gonna say that's terrible that you brought this robot here because now I don't have a job. My job was to attach the handle. I can see that being the same conversation here. But what if the answer was, okay, you no longer have to put the handle on the door. Someone else can do that. A robot can do that faster. Your new job is to learn how to repair the robot that puts the handles on the doors. So I haven't lost my job. My job actually changes. My concern, though, is that as we start to see these new opportunities evolve, I hope that we can keep pace with the new types of roles. So the training necessary to learn how to fix the robot, that's where our new space is. It's not going to be that Amelia has lost her job. And so I try to combat these types of fears about weaker skill set and content knowledge. AI has been here, it's gonna be here, but I don't fear it the way that some do. So I felt the need to put that to the side. You can't have a day-to-day conversation without talking about AI. If anybody has a question though, that you wanna leave that for our latter part. Oh, we got 26 minutes, we got plenty of time. All right, so I want to start here in terms of a concept. So we talked about the trends in higher education. I've set the stage for you. I've sprinkled a few breadcrumbs to say I have a new definition of student success. But I like this quote. It's a little old, but I had this idea of what would data days encompass. We're trying to build a community of data users, data enthusiasts, trying to empower each other. I thought about this favorite quote. It's about rowing a boat together as a group. And it says, the key to a fast boat is balance. Balanced weight, timing, and balanced pressure. Turns out that pulling as hard as you can without pulling together actually slows the boat down. And balanced power will veer the boat one direction and throw off the timing of the catch and release. Uncontrolled straining at the oar can tip your weight left or right and toss the boat side to side. So if you're not into rowing, you're like, I don't understand what all that is, catch and release. The biggest part is the bottom. A successful team pulls in perfect balance and with perfect timing. And so I say that to you to say, imagine if we're all trying to move in the same direction. Let's throw the boat example away. Everybody can't fit in the boat. But the idea is that we're all trying to do something together. We're trying to move towards student success. We're trying to increase student outcomes. We're trying to do that efficiently, and we're trying to do that consistently every day. That's kind of hard. So somebody would say, well, Amelia, what are we trying to balance in higher education? I'd say we're trying to balance two things. The first thing is past, present, and future priorities. I can't tell you the number of times I've had that conversation about how we should look at existing data from the last couple of years to make some plans for now, but what about the future? How do we allocate resources? So you want to take some time to review programs and initiatives and services, but again, the future is coming. But I also have my daily emails, quick sidebar, and no judgment here, because I'm going to answer it also. How many of you check your email every day? So do I. I talked to somebody on a call the other day, and she said, I've been at a conference for the last 2 days, and so when I come back for a conference, I like to take 1 day to re-engage with my email box and get it back down to inbox 0. See, somebody, that's what I said. I said, Julie, Julie, it's so great that you want to re-engage, but can we just come back to that one last part of your sentence? When you said inbox 0, she said, yes. I said, when you say inbox 0, do you mean inbox 0 like for the week or like for the month or like for the year? And she said, oh, I never have inboxes that have any messages in them at all. And I was like, ooh. How would one do all their data activities and daily activities and still get down to inbox 0? Anybody in here have inbox 0? I want to be your friend. Anybody? There's always one or two. I always want to. I have goals now. I got the inbox 0 goals. But you know what happens? My daily activities combined with all the things I'm trying to plan for the future, I get caught up. And so inbox 0 has not been inbox 0 since my first day of work at NAFTA. And since then, I've not had an inbox 0. I offer that to say, if you're someone who's balancing multiple things at the same time, you are in good company. And it's totally expected that at some point you're going to say, I need to pause. I need to go back through all of my notes from these previous things. I want to plan for the future, but time though, it's just hard. I leave this with you. It's one of my favorite interpretations. So Jason Lane contributed a chapter to a book that I co-edited with 2 colleagues, and it was called The Analytics Revolution. But Jason Lane makes the case that we are moving from prediction to prescription. So those last 2 boxes. I put that on the slides earlier, so I want to bring this back and explain what I meant. On most occasions, and even though he titles it Data Available to Policymakers, we all kind of go through this cycle that starts off with what happened. We had the data days and a year ago. How many people came? What did they talk about most? What were the popular topics? What parts of the campus did they come from? So it starts off with that question of what happened. Then it moves into why did it happen? Oh, so most people came and they sat in on these sessions. Most people came from IT. Not too many people came from student affairs. They were busy doing things, probably advising somebody, something like that. Why did it happen? So you're moving now from looking at the past, which is what happened, into why did it happen? Those 2 questions alone, if we're balancing past, present, and future, could take up most of our time. I can imagine the planning committee for data days spent a lot of time looking at what happened last year and why and trying to figure that out. Then you move into the present. The key question is what's going on now? So you're in this real-time monitoring. How many people have checked in for data days today? How many people are online? How does that compare to last year's numbers? Do we want to cut it off? Do we want to leave it open for a little bit longer? You want me to speak louder? Oh, you said keep going. We're trending up. Very good, very good. I thought you said, yeah, we're trending up. That's where we would go with it. And then from there, so we've looked at the past, what happened, why did it happen, what's going on right now, and now we get into the future. And that's where that predictive modeling comes in. You all probably have heard over the last few years this idea that predictive analytics, we can predict the likelihood that we know how many people will come for the 3rd annual data days based on prior data. What will happen? And if that's not enough, we usually move into, we know what happened, we know why it happened, we know what's going on now, we know what we think will happen. And the last question, prescriptive, what are we gonna do about it? What should be done? And so when we're talking about that in the concept of student success, is we've seen the enrollments. How many students have enrolled from this particular background? Why did they enroll? Why did they come from these particular zip codes, things of that sort? Then what's going on right now? What's Georgia Tech's current student enrollment? Then you might say, based on all of that data, typically what undergirds the artificial intelligence that we're talking about, what do we think will happen? We're looking at the class of 2025. How many people do we think will actually come? All common questions. And then what are we gonna do about it? So to move from prediction to prescription is probably where we're gonna be in the next 2 or 3 years if we're not already there. I think the models will become so sophisticated that we'll spend less time asking those first 4 questions and more time saying, what can we do about it? How can we do that together? So to have a data days conversation about empowerment, we're gonna live probably in that prescriptive, figuring it out type phase. So we're balancing past, present, and future priorities. We're also balancing multiple purposes for gathering, analyzing, sharing, and using data. And I put the first one up there, routine analyses and ad hoc studies. By show of hands if you're able, how many of you have had a data-related role? IR, institutional assessment, something like that. I know how this goes. So let's say you have been in charge of submitting the census information, let's say for iPads, something like that, or common data set, or maybe the NESI survey. And that's your day-to-day, you're doing it mostly. And then you get a call from Daren who says, hey, I got a question about the number of students who are majoring in chemistry that have been enrolled for 60 credit hours or more. You're like, I can get that to you. How soon do you need it? Well, I kind of needed it like yesterday. And you say, okay, I'll do that. And then you get to work on it, you send the information. And Daren says, because Daren had great ideas, did I say chemistry? I meant biology. You mind? How soon do you need it? Well, I kind of needed it right before, but maybe by tomorrow. And they send it to you. And you say, did I say biology? I really meant physics. And so at some point you're like, but my information for the federal reporting is still due. And so this idea that at all times you have your routine things, Daren would never do that, by the way. Routine things and you have ad hoc studies. So you're trying to keep in balance the stuff that has to get done, but the stuff that just pops up. The VP who was just here, the executive VP, I imagine if the phone rings and there's a request there, you probably would answer it, I think, just because they're a nice person and maybe the positionality as well. Centralized and decentralized processes, I love the idea that you free the data, let the data be free, but there are some who would say, this is my data, don't touch my data, don't analyze my data, don't report on my data because it's mine and I know it best. What is that person, Amelia, in student affairs talking about? That's not the data set that I use. That would never happen on this campus, I'm certain. On some campuses, it actually does. The idea that there be multiple consumers and producers of information and that governance and privacy concerns all around. And so you're like, ooh, how do we balance all of these things? I don't know what we would do after that. And if that's not enough, you have lots of challenges and opportunities. So I've written this journal article about all the things that you're trying to keep in balance. I won't read all of these specifically, but I'll highlight 2 of them. One is privacy and proactivity. So I want to give you a couple of quick sidebar examples. So I like the idea of using data for just-in-time improvements. Remember when I said we're going to move from prediction to prescription? We're going to move from predicting whether or not Amelia will stay to prescribing certain things. So I'll give you a couple examples. These are from other campuses, I promise. This is not Georgia Tech. You would never do this. Or maybe you would if you found these to be exciting. But I feel like I'm not going to tell you something that you want to do. All right, so I was at a conference, and I gave a presentation to the fellow data nerds like me, and excited them a lot. And I said, any questions? Anybody want to share what's going on? And I got a hand raised in the back, and they said, I would like to tell you that we have 100% attendance for all of our classes. I said, you have 100% attendance? They said, we have 100% attendance. I said, how do you do that? They said, we force students to go to class. And I said, how do you do that? And they said, we know by all the information that we gather what each student's schedule is. And so we determined that the time they're supposed to be in, let's say this room for class, we've shut off access on their ID to every other building, every other room, except for that room. That's the only place they can go. I hear the shock or the excitement. I don't know how you respond to that. And they said, so what do you think? I said, I think you should stop doing that. I don't think that's a good idea. But if you think about it, okay, we back on. All right. So Amelia, what do you think about this? I said, I think that you should stop doing that. And so at that point, I was like, you gotta admire the intentionality, right? I mean, the fact that they would say, we know that attending class is a big deal, that students who spend time in the seat actually will probably do better than those who don't. And they went so far as to say, what data do we have about their classes? We can get it from the swipe cards. So on the one hand, you wanna applaud them for them moving from prediction to prescription. On the other hand, you wanna say, don't do that. That's a little over the top. How can you provide just-in-time resources, but at the same time not go over the board, and say, this is too much? Y'all want another example? One more, just for kicks and giggles, okay. Y'all would never do this, okay? Somebody don't take notes about this and say, ooh, that mandatory attendance thing, I think we can do that. The next thing, okay, now this is probably more regular case, and this is not new at all. So this is probably at least 3 or 4 years ago. I like to use this as an example, and this probably is the smoother approach that we probably would try. So let's say Sandy and Daren and I are in that Calculus 1 class, and we're doing okay. Daren and Sandy have solid A- averages, and Amelia, even though she's a data person, just can't crack it. And I got a solid C-. And so I'm right there at the edge. I probably need a little bit more support. We meet up and say we're gonna go have some pizza. And we walk past the library. At the time we walk there, I get a text message that Daren and Sandy don't get. My text message says, Amelia, looks like you're near the library. Want to let you know that tutoring is available right now on the 4th floor for this section of calculus. Meanwhile, Sandy and Daren are walking on to the car to go get the pizza. I, however, realize my grade in the class, and I say, hey, I'll catch you all later. Now, that's pretty simple, right? You think on the one hand, that's pretty good. You had to get my average so far for midterms, you had to get my location, you had to get the location of the library, all of that together at the same time. So you just gave me real-time support at the time that I needed. On the other hand, that's creepy. Okay. If we are at the football game going to see the Falcons and you want to let me know at halftime that if I pass by Nathan's Hot Dogs, I can get 15% off. That's still a little creepy, but I kind of want that 15% off for the hot dog. If I'm on the campus, I do want to actually do better in calculus, but I kind of don't want to know that you're tracking me at all times. You got the Wi-Fi access. So all I'm saying here is that the challenges and opportunities of data-informed decisions are many. One that I talk about a lot is balancing this privacy piece and the proactivity piece. You want to be proactive because that could be the difference between me not, getting out of that calculus class. But on the other hand, the creepy factor though. You just let that sit with you all for a little bit. We can talk more if you got reactions in the question and answer part. All right, so here's that was probably when the mic should have gone off. But if you're thinking, how can we maintain balance? We talked about balance, rowing together, all moving in the same place, and then helping students succeed, which I already kind of sprinkled the idea. I have a new definition. Amid fast-paced changes and my inbox is still not down to 0, how do we do all this together at the same time? And now I have for you 3 keys to using data in pursuit of student success. The first one, communicate a clear and consistent definition of student success. All right, so in that updated blog post, coming back to my story earlier, so 2018, I had a definition, I told them what it was, I'll spare you that, we don't have the time. But as I introduced the new definition that I had, I said the value of a college experience is under more scrutiny now than ever before. It's imperative that we prepare students to realize the value of higher education and clearly demonstrate it in their post-college actions. That's kind of my way of saying the stakes are high, y'all. College is expensive, a lot of pressure there, and people want to know, is college worth it? And I would say, yes, it is. I'm completely bought into that. I mean, you know where I work, I'm in the same field with you all. But I would say at some point, retention, persistence, and graduation, that's the baseline. If all we're using to describe student success is those 3 things, I think we can do more. But it was hard for me to come up with a definition of student success that would resonate with Georgia Tech, Florida State, because every campus is different. I said, what if I flip the question? Instead of asking, what is student success in terms of what a campus would define as, instead say, what should a successful student be able to do? That gives me more latitude to move around and stuff. So the question is, how are we defining it? Here's how I'm defining it. I would say, let's keep retention, persistence, and graduation. But I think 4 things, in addition to the previous 4, a successful student in college should be able to do. 1, interpret information from multiple sources and determine which details are useful to make decisions. Now, I say that because it might seem simple, but a student, regardless if they're traditionally aged or they're part-time or they're working, at some point they're getting a lot of information all at the same time. They're going to see their advisor, they're talking to their friends, they may have family who's advising them, they're reading the news, they're producing scholarship, they're doing all these things. A lot of information is coming in about everything from how to navigate college to just how to eat healthy to how to get enough sleep. And as you can imagine, with all that information, they're probably trying to figure out what's the best course of action. We do that now. I mean, honestly, I have my inbox for my email. I got everything from a reminder about Marcus's vaccinations to a reminder that my cable bill is on auto pay to a reminder about a walking group that I had joined, all within the first couple minutes of the day. And so I'm trying to interpret and make decisions all the time. Imagine if you're a college student doing that too. That's a skill set that as they get to be farther along in their career they should keep. The next, they should realize the scope and scale of various political, social, economic, educational, health, and other systems. I'll say it succinctly. What happens in one part of the country impacts another part of the country. What happens in one part of the world impacts another part of the world. Imagine if you're a college student and you're realizing that for the first time. You're probably going to reach a point where you're like, that book that I was reading is relevant, but I want to do something about it, which leads to number 3. They would commit to a self-authored mission statement that guides their personal and professional aspirations. And so I see it like a linear journey. So it's not to say that the classic answer is, Amelia, you're in college, you'll figure it out, just work through it. I think the mission statement could change. But at some point when you're enrolled in college, you should have a why. You should have that idea that I chose this particular major because there's an issue, maybe locally, maybe abroad. I want to do something about it. And I got all this information that I'm interpreting. This is why I'm a biology major. I think that's successful. And then lastly, so you've gone through the case of getting the information. You realize the scope and scale of why it's important. You know what you want to do. And then lastly, you turn it into something. So they would develop expertise in one or more areas that challenges their creativity and provides opportunities for them to successfully meet their needs. So in essence, it could be you get a job or you start a business. But basically, you translated all the information. You realize how important it is. You want to do something about it, and then you actually put that into action. I think if we do that and they graduate and persistent major and they make friends and they do it in the most cost-effective way, that seems like success to me. So that's what I've come up with in 2023. That's the bar that I would say we're trying to get to. Oh, yay. Good. All right, so key number 1 was figure out your own definition of success. And you're happy to borrow, welcome to borrow mine. The second one, this is the part where if I had a drum roll, this is the part where I hope to inspire you and empower you and convince you that we are all data people. All right, so I have a data identity framework. This came from this book that I wrote called You Are a Data Person. And it came from a conversation kind of like this, where I sit down at a conference and do a presentation and someone says, that was really cool, but Amelia, I just want to tell you something. They actually kind of lowered the voice and they say, I'm not a data person. I say, what do you mean? They're like, I'm not a data person. I say, but yes, you are. And they would say, no, I'm not. And I say, well, did you check the weather today? And they would say, yes, I did. I say, well, could you tell me what the average light bill in your home has been for the last 3 months? They would say, yes, I see what you're trying to do, Amelia, but that's not the same. I'm saying I'm not a data person at my job. And I'm thinking, but yes, you are. If you're running a program, do you know the average number of people who come? If you're on the planning committee for data days, about how many people came and stayed for all the sessions. At some point, we all use data every day. So I kept having that conversation, and I wanted to write something that was a little bit more positive, a little bit more affirming and uplifting. And so the book is really easy to follow because I've pretty much made 2 assumptions. One is that every professional in higher education, regardless of their role, can use data in their daily work, including the groundskeeper. And you might say, how? I would say that person knows about how long and how often they should be cutting the grounds across the campus. They know the average amount of fuel that it takes. They know the average cost of that fuel. Now, that may not necessarily translate to direct impact on students one-on-one, but you do need a well-groomed campus to create the environment that you want. So the next is that open communication, supportive sharing of results, and ongoing collaboration have to be in place. The only way this thing is going to work is if we all agree that we're in a space where there's room for improvement, and we're not going to be shy about sharing things that are working and shy about things that are not so there yet. All right, so in this framework, I think we all have 6 core abilities. Everybody, to some degree, all 6 of these things. Curiosity and inquiry. It's the ability to formulate and ask a clear question. So I gave that example earlier about, hey, can you get me that information on chemistry students? Ooh, I mean biology students. Ooh, I mean. If you're the person in the room who's always saying, what are we gonna do with this? If we collect this information, how are we gonna use it? That's something to celebrate. If you get the question more refined in the beginning, it saves you a lot of time, saves you resources. Your colleagues will thank you and they will appreciate you being clear about what you want to do. The next, because I had to talk about research and analysis, is the ability to select the appropriate methodology for what you want to do. So should it be a focus group? Should it be an interview? Should it be a survey? If you have a knack for that type of thing, I think that's something to celebrate. Communication and consultation, something about being able to get in front of an audience or be before them via memo or a brief if you want to write one, a quick podcast, the idea that you can explain and contribute in conversation, something that's really good. Campus context and industry context, I like these 2 a lot. They're probably my favorites. The idea that someone who has been on a campus for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, they've seen a lot of things go and come. They've seen a lot of things start and stop. So if you say, you know what we should do? A data days. Picture it, the year 2030. Somebody will say, we did that. It was a great success. We changed the name to say data week because it was so successful, but they would be the one to say, we've tried this before. You have knowledge of an institution and you don't want to repeat old habits. Industry context means you know what's going on outside of Georgia Tech. And then lastly, strategy and planning is the ability to put all this together. How much of certain resources do you need to do certain things? So I'm making the case that all of these 6 areas, if I told you the framework only had 6 areas, you'd probably buy in. What if I told you it had 24? That each of the 6 had 4 subsequent, spoiler alert, it has 24. I won't read all these to you, but my idea is that across all of the 24 components, we all have and use some level of most of these things on a daily basis. So I'll skip ahead. These are the key principles. Everybody's identity is comprised of 6 things, I think. And you're going to use them more or less depending on where you are. So a good example would be, let's say today is my first day at Georgia Tech. My campus context is not going to be that high because I haven't been here that long to understand what's going on. But if I've been here 10 years, it's probably going to be high. But if I transfer and then go to Florida A&M University, my campus context is not as strong. The goal is not to have perfection or super high level of all 6, but to keep all 6 in flow and recognize at various points in your career that you're going to need all 6 of those things. Also, you're not going to be doing all types of work for all 6 things at all times, but you probably will have a little bit of all those things woven in. I could take almost any job description, if you want to test it, any job description, if you look at it in the list of skills and abilities, something in there talks about communication, something in there talks about gathering relevant information, something in there talks about knowledge of the field, something in there talks about management and stewardship of resources. So it's really closer to you than you actually think. To give you some examples in the book, I say that if you have 2 of those 6 things, there are certain profiles or personas that you probably embody without even thinking about it. If you're somebody who likes the research and analysis piece and you're really pretty fond of communicating, I would say you make a great curator. Somebody who's always explaining, here's what the issue is, here's who it's important to, and here's why we should do something about it. Without even realizing, you're the person they call, like, why are we doing that particular survey? The next, if you're just generally curious, you got a lot of questions and you've been on the campus for a long time, you could be that person that says, hey, if anybody's having a meeting about the data days, you need to make sure that you invite Sandy. They're a connector. They know who on the campus does what, and they're usually talking so much about things that they're genuinely curious, it works out really well. And then lastly, if you're someone who knows how to put an action plan together, if you're somebody who's been on the campus for a while, you're probably that person that I would say is the mission monitor. You're the one that says, this does not seem close to our definition of student success. Should we pause a little bit? You're keeping in mind the bigger frame of what you're doing. So I hope this has convinced you that when you're thinking about whether or not you're a data person, that we all are. It's not a question of whether you are or not. Now, I know better. I did not title the book, You Are a Data Scientist. I'm not saying if you read the book, you're about to be the next institutional researcher for your campus, but I am saying it's the book that will convince you that you are ready to sit at any table and talk about any data conversation. So I got 4 minutes left. This key is 1 slide, and I want to leave some room for questions. So we said we can at 10. We still got time for questions? Okay, good. I got thumbs up. All right, there we go. The critical culture areas. Now, I've set the stage. I've told you about student success and what I think is going to be necessary for us to define it. I've convinced you, hopefully, maybe start to plant the seed that you're a data person. If somebody were to ask me, Amelia, what makes this thing fall apart? What are the reasons why a really, really high aspiring campus that says they want to have a data culture, not Georgia Tech, why would they not get there? The number 1 and 2 reasons that I hear most often are not the number 1 and 2 reasons why it doesn't happen, but it's usually, Amelia, if we could just have more money, if we could just buy that system that we've been looking at, it only costs $1 gazillion, but if we got that, we would be set. I mean, that would fix all of our problems. I don't know if anybody in IT has ever heard that. They want to buy this thing because it will solve all the problems. I get it. I get it. You could get that platform. It probably would be improved, but it wouldn't fix your culture. The second is we got to do more training. We got to have data days every term. We got to do this all the time. We got to get more people on this campus data literate. We got to do it. They got to be data driven. It's got to be mission centered. It's got to be it. And we're going to bring in all types of facilitators. That's going to be required. It's going to be mandatory. And we're going to train our way into this. And that could help too. You can get the system, you get the training. But if you want to know what really pulls at the threads, this is not you all. These are neighbors that would do this. These are the critical culture areas to address: competition, politics, and denial. And I'll walk you through each of these 3, and it should resonate with you. And if you're wondering, back to that boat rowing all together, competition. Well, nothing wrong with a little friendly competition. You know, 2 people on the campus, they say, hey, I got a program, I got data days, and I got data plus days. Well, my thing is happening in November. How many people came to yours? And it's like, well, let's just have a little friendly competition. Whoever gets the most, they get the spread in the campus newspaper. And it starts off really well, because you have the VP comes back and introduces everything. It's all for the good of the order. But what happens when you have those 2 advisors who are both advising a group of students? And the idea that they're supervising, they would never do this here, but another campus says, if those students that you're supervising and advising don't have better outcomes, we're we're going to talk about your performance improvement plan that you're about to be on. This idea that you would put two individuals, two programs, two types of initiatives against each other for competition, that's when it starts to fall apart. Because now I'm nervous. I don't want to share my data about how I'm doing because it could be used in a punitive way. When you start saying things like that, I say be very, very careful. Positive competition, of course, I want data days every day. I want data days every month. I want data days every year. But if it starts to be siloed in a very competitive way where it's this or that, I say pause, full stop, don't do that. It needs to be a little bit more integrated. That's the easy one. Y'all see how that could probably be it? Number 2, politics. The exclusive side deal, the exclusive opportunity. Hey, Amelia, just want to let you know the provost is going to have a meeting next week. And if you come to it, we're both invited, and you provide some data about my program, when I get to your meeting with the VP of Student Affairs, I'm going to provide some data for yours, and we'll just work this thing out, right? We'll settle up later on. But basically, you support me, I support you. It's going to work out. Don't invite Daren, though, because when Daren comes and talks about IT, he's going to have too much to say about student affairs and academic affairs. We'll get to him. We'll get to him later. It's always nice when you're on the invitation list and you're in the room. But when you're not in the room, that does not feel good. And after the meeting is over, someone tells you, hey, we settled everything. I'm now going to be your new supervisor. And you're like, I can't believe this happened. This would never happen at Georgia Tech. But if you want to know what pulls at the threads of a data culture, the political side of things, the leverage side, the I helped you, you helped me. And again, I know you would never do this, but it does happen. When the pressure is high to use data to show outcomes, it brings out sometimes the not so nice side of people. And then third, if competition doesn't get you, if politics, you've managed to get through that, straight up denial. Denial and the spin toward the positive. Amelia, 50% of students have told us they don't like the dining hall experience. Well, that means the 50% do. I don't know what the big deal is. Amelia, 50% of people have told me that the library experience was not that great. It'll get better. It's a big deal. Amelia, insert other terrible thing. Well, I talk to students all the time. Just last month, I talked to 3 students, and they all told me that they liked the dining hall experience. This idea that they cannot be convinced otherwise. My beloved alma mater, FAMU, was named College of the Year by one of these surveys in 1997. Imagine if every meeting I went to and I said, but we're College of the Year. Somebody would say, we were College of the Year at some point. The spin toward the positive or the overly used anecdote is the thing that just does not move action forward. And so I leave you with these as considerations because the first key of the clear definition of student success, check. The second clear of do we have a data identity, check. The third, if you don't clear this one, that's the one where things fall apart. That's really not going to be the case here. I mean, honestly, I've already said the branding, the mission, the rooting of what you're doing is all there. So I got some additional considerations. This is my next to last slide. Things to keep in mind. So we've talked about a lot. Well, I've talked a lot about things. I want to remind you of these 3 things. Take your time. Try not to rush. There's a part of the book that says, imagine if you get energized from this experience and you want to do everything all at the same time. Progress takes time. No need to rush. The second is a tip that I give very, very often, which is to jot down those major decisions because we're all going to have transitions of some type. Maybe switch roles, switch offices. If you have a major decision that you've made to invest in that platform or to possibly start a data days, keep as many notes as you can about the progress that you're making because that leaves continuity plans for the next person to pick it up. And then third, celebration. I told you I was excited to be here. I like the idea of a data days thing. Take the pause. Even if you don't have a reason to, have your office celebration. You know, send somebody a note and maybe an email that they can delete later and get down to inbox 0. But the idea is that the work can be hard, encourage the recognition. It doesn't have to be super flashy, but let somebody know like, hey, that was a really good thing that you did. I think those things add to the work that we're trying to do in a much better way. All right, 3 cool networks, the Node for IR and IE, two fellows named Eric that I like a whole lot. It's totally free. If you like to read about data things without at a kind of surface level news-wise, the Node for IR is a really good one. It's my favorite one. The Advising Success Network, I know I mentioned advising earlier. That's a network of 5 organizations that are working to help students with their academic decisions and career decisions, financial decisions. And then Credentials As You Go, that conversation I said earlier about new types of entries into the market to get credentials, they're following that really closely. And then my favorite 3 books right now, Becoming a Student-Ready College. You might have heard that book that came around. It was like the idea of rather than ask students, are they ready for college? Ask the college, are you ready for students? The second edition of that book just came out, so I'm excited about that. There's a book about reframing assessment to center equity. And the third one is Square Pegs and Round Holes. If you're ever interested in student development theory and how students matriculate through college, it's a kind of more contemporary approach to that conversation. So I think we are right there at the time for questions. I think of it like a buffet of topics. If we got time for at least one, I would love to know what you all think. Oh, we got plenty of time. Okay, that's it. So now I've pushed us to a place of thoughts and conversation. Anybody? Big question, small question, reaction, thought, idea. Yeah, we got one. You want me to? I can walk the mic. You want me to? Yeah. Oh, you saying, yeah, you know what? We might have feedback. Yes. I'm gonna stay up here. I'm gonna stay in my lane. Stay right there.
So I have a question. It's kind of combining your AI topic and the student success topic. So we're seeing a push of wanting to create sort of an automated AI-based support to students to support them with things like the question you asked, you know, I'm a chef, I'm an architect, I need to graduate in 3 years. So they have something they can speak to at all times through like a chat bot.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on balancing that with, let's say, augmenting the advisors in a normal capacity, let's say, even if it's just reducing their administrative burden so they can spend more time working with the students directly.
Absolutely. So I think the question you asked, I would add probably a little bit more to it. I think we need that. So if you're asking because you're moving in that direction, I think that's the best way to go. I'll give you a quick example in health and well-being, and I'll bring it back to your question about kind of academic career. During the pandemic, when a lot of campuses were not physically there in person, we saw two things happen. One was the rise in the number of individuals who said, I'd like to engage in telehealth, something where I could talk with a counselor of some type. And we saw the number of those requests coming after 5 p.m. on the rise too. The idea is that in a traditional setting, you think, well, student comes to campus, they're here till maybe 5, 6 p.m., maybe 7 or 8 if they're doing a club or activity, and they go home. What we started seeing was that they were on all the time. They were studying at various times. They were also nervous about tests at various times. And so a lot of campuses said, I don't know that we can meet the demand for this many individuals who need this kind of help. We should introduce telehealth with a chatbot type option that would provide a little bit of triage or some early questions to answer. And then if it's something more significant, then you connect to an advisor. I think that's where we're going to go. In the same example with academic advising, career advising, financial advising. I think the idea that the chat piece should have a little bit more of a cultural component, so certain keywords. So it's going to take some time. So back to your question, I think we should do it. I think that the timing of it will probably be better than before, because the idea that if I'm at home at 9 p.m., I don't necessarily have to talk to somebody right now, but I'd like to have an answer before I can go to sleep and do type of things. I think the two key elements are probably going to be, when is it time to switch off from the chat feature into a real live conversation? And two, when you're in the chat feature, how much of the cultural things that chat piece should know relate to me? So there's certain types of gender identity terms or other things that might help the chat system identify me, but if they get that wrong, I'm going to log off immediately. Or if they have certain access to my files, if they don't present the communication of that in the right way, I probably would get even more nervous and log off. So the interactivity balance, which we try to refer to as the mix of how much interpersonal and how much chatbot is the most important thing. When you're looking at that, I'd probably say the communication piece of that is it. But I think the future is that we're going to have that be commonplace, that students will become conditioned to the idea that we're probably going to just have something available to them. Now, sidebar, during the pandemic, there were a lot of campuses that said, we're just going to change the hours of operation. So I now work nights. So where I would normally be on campus during the day, I now work nights so I can be that live person. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think we have enough resources to have someone working the night shifts, at 2 a.m. So does that answer your question? Okay, thank you very much. Got one down. How many left? You got one? Any more? All right, same row. No pressure to the people in the other. Okay, we're gonna go here, we got here, and then here.
I really liked your updated definition of student success. And my question for you is, how do you reconcile the US News and World rankings having very specific, particular set of criteria for being #1 or top 10 or whatever? And that seems to be what we promote to students in high school, is following those particular set of metrics on what is a good school.
Yeah.
And your updated definition of you need to be success is about being a well-rounded student, about thinking critically, kind of what you described. So how do you reconcile administration saying well, we want to improve our US News and World ranking number, and it's these 6 metrics, that's what we need to focus on, and also thinking about having a well-rounded student body?
Back to the balance. You got the two things. You got competing priorities. I'd say, I don't know of a single college president that if you ask them if they were desiring to be #1 in the country at something, anything, #1 campus in the country for a particular program or #1 campus in general, they're probably going to say yes. And there's nothing wrong. Remember, that's only the 3 things that pull the threads: competition. If I'm #1, that means everybody else is #2 or less, which means we're at the top and it's lonely at the top, and it's just what it is. That's not necessarily a bad thing to have aspirations of excellence. I think the communication of those aspirations is where we start to get in a little bit of trouble. If you've been following the news about college rankings, there have been many critiques, and some campuses have pulled out of those rankings for various reasons. I think the campus has determined whether or not they want to do that. I think some are in a better position to do that than others. And I say that because those that have name recognition, you say, well, I don't need official rankings to tell the public that we're a really great school. We've been around for 100+ years. People know us in this space. That's fine. You could think of the Ivies in that space. They don't have anything to lose if they're not at the top of the list. But for the small regional comprehensive institution, maybe the college that doesn't get as much attention, they want to be in that list to bring additional attention in a time when enrollments are declining and competition for students is real. So the piece of the rankings that relates to aspiring to excellence, I like that. I don't know any campus that is going to be managing enrollments and managing debits and credits from students and their hard-earned, money or the government's money. They should want to aspire to excellence. However, I think if the focus on that is so high that they've not done their deep work to make sure that just getting the students in is not the stopping place, then it's going to fall off. Because imagine if I chose this campus because it was in the rankings as number 3, and I get there and I'm like, I just don't feel like I'm welcomed here. I don't feel like I'm affirmed here. So it's not really an either or. I think it's a both and. I think the idea is that you would leverage rankings or other strategic communication to let people know, like, hey, if you've never heard of this campus, we have a lot to offer. Let us show you all the different places that could be good. For the average family who's not in this room and doesn't have access to one of us, they're probably going to go to Google and put in best college for, math major, something like that. That will hook them. But again, it doesn't take long to see if the environment is there. And so I think an intentional definition of student success, you've got to keep the things that the rankings use. You absolutely better tell your accrediting body and the state system office that you are managing your retention, enrollment, persistence, graduation, all those metrics. But beyond that, the individual student is going to stay at the place where they feel like they're learning something that's cross-functional, they're making friends, they have a clear path to a career, and hopefully their financial outcomes are there. So I think our work is a little bit twofold, but not equally proportioned. Our biggest work is to ensure that those successful metrics internally to the campus and students are prioritized. The other priority is to make sure that as we're doing this work, the general public knows it's happening. I see rankings as one way to get there, but there are a lot of other things you could leverage. So if a campus decided to pull out, I wouldn't blame them, as long as they have another way to get there. Seems like I had nothing but long-winded answers for these questions, but it was good. As you can see, I told you I got a lot to talk about, a lot of thoughts, but I got the answer to your question? All right. All right, we had 2 more. We got one here and then one in the row right in front of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a semi-2-part question.
I'm ready.
The first part is with the introduction of AI and a lot of the chatbots that are going on. One, how would you introduce that into a climate that's not used to that? And the second part is with today's society, we have a lot of non-traditional students. Most of them are over the age, getting over the age of 40 and 50. How would you, or what would your thoughts be on those people that feel that chatbots and all those things are so non-personal?
Mm-hmm.
And how would you tell people to introduce that into the system or get people more comfortable with that without feeling like they're being alienated or ignored?
Mm-hmm. My broad answer is that it has to be supplemented with the human experience. So in that book, You Are a Data Person, I have some predictions. And the last one, I think number 8, is artificial intelligence will not replace human decision making. It is a resource to be leveraged, but it is not a replacement for the interaction thing. I'll give you a good example. I'm gonna work my way back to your question. So the second question was, how do you deal with the personalization of it so it doesn't feel kind of cold and there's no relational thing? And the first question was, how do you introduce it to people who are not used to using it? The answer is the same for both, but let me give you a sidebar. I wonder if you all have ever done what I've done. So imagine if I'm about to fly back to DC later on today, and I want to change my departure from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And that should be pretty easy. Let's say I want to go into the app, the Delta app, and I want to do it. If for some reason it doesn't work, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call Delta and say, can you help me change my flight? And you know what happens. Hello, I'm Aaron. I'm trained to recognize full sentences. In one word, tell me what I can do for you today. Representative. Now, I could have easily just said, I want to change my flight from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. I don't want to do that. I was a representative. It sounds like you want to speak to a representative. Is something I can help you with? Yes. Connect me to a representative. That's what it is. I work in this field. I know that the system is probably set up that if I said keywords, flight today, change time, whatever, it would probably have done it, and I would have skipped through so many steps, maybe down to the last part, which might be a change fee, something like that. I don't want to do that. because I want to talk to somebody. I want to say, I was at a really great data days conversation. I'm thinking about changing my flight. If I change that flight, where would I be sitting? What time does it land? Is it on time? Is the incoming flight? I got questions, things that I want to talk about. And I just simply don't want to do that with a chatbot because inherently I don't trust that the chatbot will do it faster than a person would. When in essence, maybe it will, because I'm probably not the only person who's ever called and wanted to change the flight time, but I don't know that. I'm special. I don't want to do that. And so I can tell you at the core, trying anything new is hard when you can't necessarily convince yourself that the experience is going to be better than what you're used to. It's my dad with his flip phone, and he will never move past the flip phone. We just disconnected the home phone. Don't you tell him. Don't tell him. The phone is still on the wall. He thinks it's still working. But whenever he wants to call somebody, he wants to call on the phone. So it's just inherently, it's our nature. Change is hard, is what it is. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's exclusive to the 40-year-old. It's exclusive to all of us if we want to do something different. But I'll tell you what's at stake, the reason why we have to do it. So I'll use the example. I promise I'm coming back to the first question. I'll use the example of healthcare. So my parents are aging. They're not at the age where you have to live with them per se, but the health portal. To get into anything and make an appointment and do all these things, they send lab information that way. The doctors talk back and forth. They live on that farm that I was telling you about in rural Lake City, Florida. The internet access is terrible, but imagine that's the only way you can actually connect. They could resist and say, no, I will sit on this phone with the health, the hospital or the doctor's office for 2 hours just to talk to a person, or I will get that hotspot that barely works out there and I will log on and I will figure out how to do it. Sometimes you get pushed into change. Other times you get kind of led into change. What I would say back to your first question of how do you get people to be more comfortable with it, I think it's all in communication. I would love to go to the website for these airlines and they say, I promise you, for real, it would be faster if you would do the chatbot, and then give some examples, something like that. If you're on a campus where you have a colleague that's a little bit skeptical, maybe make the use case much, much, much simpler than where you really want to go. Maybe the idea is we're going to transform our whole intake process for advising. It's all going to be chatbots. Before you jump straight there, let's maybe have a working session where we say, tell me all the things about the current intake process that you wish could be faster, and we would fix it through some type of example. Then you introduce the tool and technology, give people time to use it, and they can start to embody the idea that they now use chatbots. The communication piece, once we work that part out, I think the trust follows, and then next thing you know, everybody's using it, and it's better. I'm not there. I've got a thumbs up. There we go. Very good. Don't y'all tell my daddy that phone doesn't work, because if he does, I'll be in big trouble. I'm serious. That was a 2 months ago conversation. Here, we got a question right here. The mic is coming. Oh, you didn't have a question. Oh, is there another question then? I thought I saw you. Okay, we got one back here. They told me I have to use the mic yeah, you never know, because your back is turned, so people behind you might not get it.
So the AI seems to be the most popular question so far.
It is. That's why I put the slides in there about the new report.
My question is, do you think AI will actually force more personal interactions like your Spanish teacher? Mm-hmm. Because the question is, how do I know somebody wrote it? Well, you have to know the student. Yeah. So is it not going to require professors to get to know their students rather than just be a face in the class?
Yeah. I mean, I think so, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to be AI exclusively as a thing. But yeah, now to be fair, the faculty side of things is a hard side of things. There's a lot of pressure there on all of us, on all of our jobs. But you're right, depending on the setup. So imagine will it push professors to know their students better? What if your section has 400 students? You're like, how close can I get to them? That's a lot. I still got my inbox is not at zero. I got a lot of other things I'm doing. So I would say yes, but it might not necessarily look like get to know them the same way that we're used to. When I was in college and undergrad, it was literally go to the office hours, sit down, talk with them, tell them what you're interested in. Get to know them might be get to know them through their assignments. So the idea that if AI, back to that example of summarize the first 3 chapters of the book, if the question prompts, the things they're writing about is going to require them to delve a little bit more into the personal side of things, I would say you get to know your students by the answers they give you, by the way they communicate through their assignments. And yes, there'll still be a handful that you can talk to one-on-one in person. But I don't know that every student wants that. But I think that the communication through assignments and e-portfolio, so another day at another time, if you want to talk about the future of the learning record and why I think transcripts are going away, the e-portfolio or other collections of their work, that's how you get to know them. That's how they can communicate. But I think AI will be the tool that kind of bolsters that type of engagement. Again, it'll be faster for some, right on pace for others, and there will still be those who just resist. But overall, I think we are moving to a space of getting to know the student better, just in general. Great questions. Oh, good questions. Was there another one? Okay, we got one here. This is so cool. I was excited. I want this part of the thing. Y'all gonna have to give me the hook though. I mean, I'm not watching time when it's time. He's like, oh no, I'm coming over. Oh, this last one, they're like, the hook is coming. Okay. All right, last one. No pressure. Bring us home.
Well, maybe I can start with a statement that says that maybe I am a data person.
You
I
are
never,
a data person. You are a data person.
never considered myself one. Well, you used a couple of examples of another campus, and I was just intrigued, and maybe this is too open-ended of a question, but the one about the library having like a targeted ad in text, and it was kind of assumed by everybody. They're like, yeah, that's going too far. But it's like, how do you know that that's going too far? What's that line? Like, say I am the library and I'm thinking of these sorts of things. How do you determine that line?
Yeah, I think the line is too far when the communication is not there. So I know in essence, when I said that text message came in and it was like, oh, wait a minute, that's creepy. As a student, when we talk to them, I've recently done a study and I sit with students and I ask them, how would you feel if you knew that your campus was tracking all of your behaviors, from your card ID swipes to where you are, to what your average grades are? Most often they're like, I thought that they were doing it anyway. If anybody has an iPhone, how many times have I said agree to those terms and conditions? They're like 40 pages long. I'm like, oh yeah, it must be fine, type of thing. I just started to say, don't track me though. I don't know, I just feel like it's not right. But again, it might be generational. I think in general, the idea is not to stop the tracking, the idea to stop monitoring, because we're doing it most times from a place of, I want to be able to move from prediction to prescription and give that real-time support. But if the communication is not there, I can give you another more egregious example of that. So short answer, I think we're going to move there. So if anybody in the room is like, that's kind of cool, I kind of like that, my only advice to you is pay attention to the communication that you send to the student. So that text message that comes to my phone, it cannot say, Amelia, that C- is going to turn to an F if you don't get to the 4th floor. You said that's like terrible. You would never do that. But you also don't want to say, it looks like you're struggling in calculus. We have some resources to help you. I would get hung up on the struggling part type thing. I'll give you another example to the same thing. Imagine if you were on a campus and you had the ID card swipe data information and you see that a student is coming either really, really early to the Health and Wellbeing Center or really, really late, 4 to 5 times per week. You might look at that and say, oh, well, they like to get their workout in times when, not people are there and they can actually have access. Or they might be coming because they have a homelessness issue and they don't want other people to know they want to use the showers and things at times aren't there. If you think that's the case, the email to send to me is not, I realize you've been coming really early or really, really late. What's going on? It's like, oh, you've been targeting, you've been following me. You could say, hey, looks like you're making great use of the Health and Wellbeing Center. We have even more resources to offer to you. Here's a long list, and mix it up. Put everything from the food pantry to housing support to tax information to studying, all those types of things. So now it looks like I'm just a regular part of the community. My campus cares about me and they're proactive. So honestly, tell you the truth, these examples are not ones to track. Don't turn off the access to all the rooms though. That one, don't do that one. But the one about the location tracking, I think it's actually not so bad. As long as the communication to the student infers that you really do care. And we're not going to get it right the first time, but tweak it to the point where they feel like they're welcomed and affirmed. So yeah, I think that's not so open-ended. I think I wrapped it up pretty well. Time flies when you talk about this stuff. But thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parnell, for your energy, your knowledge, and your time coming to Georgia Tech. Can you not hear me?
Oh, they said your microphone's not on. I've been through that. It happened to me once.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry. So thank you, Dr. Parnell, for coming to Georgia Tech. Thank you for your knowledge, your time, and your energy, and kind of making us all realize that we are data people, hopefully since we're coming to Data Days. So we have a small gift of appreciation.
Thank you so much.
All right.
So one more round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Parnell. I also want to give another thanks to everyone who is volunteering to make this event happen. We have got a team of folks behind the scenes that are helping with programming for all of our sessions today. We've got AV folks, we have technology folks, folks that are helping with our online presence and our in-person presence, parking, food, logistics. We've got a big team behind us for this event, and it's really cool to see that community come together. So thank you for all of our volunteers. Now, if you've got your raffle ticket that you got at registration, we're going to do a quick raffle. We have an amazing book, You Are a Data Person, by Dr. Amelia Parnell. You might have heard of her. Yes, and we'll get it signed. And then we have 2 other gift bags as well. So Katie, if you'll pull out our first number. Number is 376, last 3 digits, 376. Ah, we have a winner. You did. All right, our next number is 378 and 315. There we go. Two more.